Welcome to the Compliance 911 Show, a no-nonsense podcast discussing hot topics for today's busy compliance professional. It's everything you wanted to know about regulatory compliance, but we're afraid to ask. And now, here are your hosts, Dean Stockford of M&M Consulting and Len Suzio of Geodata Vision.
Welcome to our podcast series, Everything You Wanted to Know About Regulatory Compliance, but We're Afraid to Ask. Today I'm geez, isn't that awful? I can't even get the words out of my mouth. But today, happy Thanksgiving, by the way, everyone. Today I'm joined by my good friend, Len Suzio. And it's a pleasure being with you today, Len. So what interesting topic do you plan to discuss for our podcast?
Well, Dean, I have a very timely topic. As you know, the CFPB has published a proposed revision of the Section 1071 rule. The proposal includes at least 6 major revisions to Section 1071, including who reports, the definition of what a small business is, the elimination of many data points, the dropping of agricultural loans, and the removal of certain covered lenders. The notice provides a comment period that ends December 15th of this year, 2025. So listeners may want to submit comments if they are listening to this podcast prior to the December 15th deadline for comments.
Wow. Sounds like the Bureau isn't just tinkering with the rule that they originally put out. They're making some very serious changes. Am I correct on that, Len?
Oh, absolutely, Dean. The biggest changes pertain to the definition of what a small business loan is, as well as what a covered institution is, and the elimination of many data points.
So where do we start?
Well, let's look at the big changes first. The very first change I will explain pertains to what qualifies as a small business loan. Under the 2023 Section 1071 rule, a small business loan is defined as a loan to a business with $5 million or less gross annual revenue. The proposed revision changes that to only $1 million gross annual revenue or less. That sounds like a big change, and it is a big change, and it will have a profound impact on reported lending activity. A hint at the dramatic impact of the changed definition of small business loans can be seen in the 2024 CRA aggregate and disclosure data that was released by the FFIC on November 14th of this year, 2025. In that data, there were 690 lenders that reported 8.7 million small business loan originations for 2024. However, only 4.7 million of those loans were extended to businesses with a gross annual revenue of $1 million or less. In other words, over 4 million small business loans reported under CRA would not qualify as small business loans under the proposed revised Section 1071 definition of a small business. And another aspect of the proposed report of the loans reported under Section 1071 is that no renewals would be reported under Section 1071 unless they involve an increase in the loan amount. Renewals are qualified as reportable small business loans under CRA. So any renewals in the 4.7 million CRA reported small business loans will not be counted in the Section 1071 for its purposes. So together with the revised small business definition, this means that more than half of the small business loans reported under the current CRA will not be recognized for Section 1071 purposes. Now, some of our astute listeners may say, yeah, Len, but CRA defined small business loans cannot exceed $1 million in loan size, whereas there's no loan size limit in the Section 1071 rule. So some loans will be counted for Section 1071 that are not counted for CRA purposes. And my response is, yes, that's true. But since large loans typically mean large revenue streams, it's unlikely that there are going to be many multi-million dollar small business loans that will be recognized under Section 1071. There's no doubt that the gross annual revenue limit for Section 1071 will dramatically reduce by at least 50% the Section 1071 loan volume in comparison to the CRA reported small business loan activity.
That is a very big difference. Did the Bureau recognize that?
Well, yes, they did make a comment. But I think they underestimate what it may be. Their estimate was it might result in a, quote, 27% reduction in coverage of small business loans, not the 50% or more decline, I believe is much more accurate. It looks to me like they considered only the change in the definition of a small business loan and not the change in covered lenders, which you and I are about to discuss, which is going to reduce the reported lending activity all the more. So
Hmm.
I think the real impact is going to be a cut of more than 50% of the reported small business lending activity compared to the CRA activity.
Kind of crazy because I think it's against what the legislative spirit of the rule was supposed to be. But in any case,
Hmm.
what other big changes do you see coming on Section 1071's proposed rule?
Well, what I just hinted at was it can be seen in the definition of what a covered lender is, which the Bureau has changed from an annual, that means for each of the two preceding calendar years, minimum of 100 qualified small business loan originations under the current rule, to a threshold of 1,000 small business loan originations for each of the two preceding calendar years.
Boy, that's a big change. I would guess it would dramatically reduce the number of covered lenders.
Oh, yeah. Again, let's take a look at the 2024 lenders who reported small business lending activity under CRA. And it shows that only 80 of the 690 lenders who reported small business loans for 2024 would be covered under the proposed rule. That means many more CRA reported business loans would not be reported under the proposed changes in Section 1071 simply because the lenders won't be subject as a covered institution, therefore will not report. And by the way, another interesting insight provided by the 2024 CRA data uh, indicates that 10 of the 80 covered lenders under Section 71 extended more than 91% of the small business loans reported under CRA for the year 2024 for that entire group of lenders. So basically, the overwhelming share of Section 1071 small business lending activity would be generated by only 10 lenders in the entire country. Now, again, that compares to the 731 lenders who report both small business loans and small farm loans under the Community Reinvestment Act. Obviously, Section 1071 activity will be very narrowly focused on as a result of this. Now, keep in mind that the proposed Section 1071 rule will not include agricultural loans. That's another big change. So there's going to be an awful lot of lending activity that will not be reported under Section 1071 that historically has been reported under CRA. The revised definition of a small business loan, the change to the covered lender threshold, the disqualification for most renewed loans, and the elimination of agricultural loans will all result in a dramatic decrease in the loan volume scrutinized under Section 1071.
So, Len, you've covered two blockbuster changes in the proposed Section 1071 rule. And quite frankly, in my opinion, I think it's certainly going to, again, kind of modify or change what what legislature had in mind when they were implementing this rule. But what else does the Bureau propose?
Well, another big change is they're proposing that they will eliminate all the what they call the discretionary data points. The only data points that in the proposed rule that they expect to be retained by the Bureau are those maintained or mandated by statute. This means that dozens, maybe 60 to 70 data points in the proposed revision to Section 771 will be removed. Eliminated would be data points relating to pricing, the North American Industrial Classification System codes, the number of workers, the application method, the application recipient, denial reasons, and disaggregated race and ethnicity categories, et cetera, et cetera. I know that that's going to be a welcome news to a lot of our listeners because I do think the Bureau went a little haywire when it took its discretionary authority and took what were maybe a 10 mandatory report data points under the statute and expanded that to over 80 data points. So it's going to go back to really what strictly is mandated or required by the original statute itself.
Yeah,
Um, the-
I would say a vast majority of our audience today is very thankful for all of this, but
yes.
for what you're
Mhm.
saying. But I mean, I just again thinking about this, it's like, wow. I'm not really sure the value after all of these modified
Mhm.
changes, if they unfold as you have indicated. So, I guess
Mhm.
now that we have the big picture, is there anything you'd like to recommend to our listeners as we approach this? I'll call it a very tight time frame.
Yes. Oh, yeah. We're talking only a couple weeks from the day we're recording this. Before I do that, I do want to mention too that the Bureau does intend to maintain what's called the firewall, which mandates that the isolation of the government mandated data regarding race and ethnicity and sex, etc., from anyone involved in the credit decision process, unless someone is unavoidably involved in the application and credit decision making process itself. I believe that would be true for many, if not most, business loan applications,
Mm.
because typically a commercial loan officer takes the application and presents the credit to the credit committee for approval, or he or she may have the authority themselves to make the decision on their own. The rule does provide for an exception when isolation of the GMI is not possible for certain people in the credit granting process. It will require the posting of a notice to the borrower or the applicant. But I think the firewall is an unnecessary burden. And then I'll also mention the commencement date for data collection for any institutions that are covered institutions is going to be January 1st, 2028. So it's 2 more years away. So those are a couple more important points in the proposed revision to the rule. And I do want to say now is not the time to be passive. It's important to let the Bureau know your thoughts about the proposed changes in the Section 1071 rule. I would encourage listeners to submit comments to the Bureau by the December 15th, 2025 deadline.
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic, and it does have certainly massive implications for financial institutions. And I agree with you that we certainly don't want to be complacent or passive about this issue. As the old wedding saying goes, speak now or forever. Or forever hold your peace. So, uh, great topic, Lynn, and like I said, I think we pointed out some interesting challenges for institutions in the new proposed rules. So, very interesting stuff for sure. This is Dean Stockford from M&M Consulting.
And this is Len Suzio with Geodata Vision saying, we hope you enjoyed today's podcast and learned something from it. Please, we encourage you to send us requests for any topics you'd like us to cover in the future.
Thanks for listening to the Compliance 911 Show. If you like the podcast, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, please give us a like and review to help others find the show. As always, links are in the show notes, and you can always find us online at compliance911show.com. Follow M&M Consulting and Geodata Vision on LinkedIn for all the latest news and information on compliance hot topics.